What is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe show, the home of Epic Conversations, and I'm the host of Epic Conversations, 2020 Best Podcast News Award winner, 2018 Innovation Award winner given out by the Canadian Ethnic Media Association, and I am the host of the only online conversation in the world for dads and fathers. It's co-sponsored by Dad Central and also Dad Central, by the way, is Canada's national fatherhood organization, and Dove Men Care. And being part of that collaboration last year, I was part of a team that reached out to over 100,000 fathers around the world. And I take that as a real blessing. And as always, I'd like to say you're blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles, and a solution for someone's problem. We're broadcasting live in the afternoon, around 5 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time, on Sunday, February 27th, second last day of Black History Month. And every Sunday, 5 p.m. Eastern Time, we do something called Black Canada Talking. And it's a live online event where we give space, a safe and brave space for Black Canadians to express their thoughts, POVs, and opinions on stories that are important to them. And also, like today, bi-weekly, we have a panel. And today we have two wonderful people from our panel. And also we do have someone who's going to be joining us allegedly during our conversation today. So first off, we have Sarah Onyango from Ottawa. Sarah, how are you?
I'm well, Dr. Vibe, coming to you from the unceded
Gatineau.
Yes, the unceded and unsurrendered territory of the Anishinaabe people here in Gatineau. And finally, sort of, exhaling after the whirlwind of usual Black History Month events that I've had to participate in or attend or report on or interview people for. So, yeah, busy.
Is a break coming up?
No.
Okay.
Because
but you just came back from vacation. Isn't there time for
no, International Women's Day is coming up, yes. And the International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination is coming up, and then it's Easter.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. You got a point there. All right. Well, as always, a pleasure to have you, and we got some. There's nothing going on in the world, right?
Hot topics.
Hot topics. That's another program, Hot Topics. And actually, that lady's going off air soon, so that's another conversation.
Terry Shepard's
taking over, and of course we got Cesar. What is up, Cesar? How you doing?
I'm good, Dr. Vibe. Hi, Sister Sarah Onyango. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm good. First of all, let me give a shout out to the Power Up, aka One Vision, One Voice, reaching out to Black children and youth in child welfare in Ontario, celebrating the pride, celebrating the heritage, the identity and culture that happened this week. So that's why I'm wearing the shirt and reminding each and everyone in the Black community, take a moment for our children and youth who notably have different experiences, notably in terms of parenting, and that unfortunately come to deal with child welfare and all institutions, of course. Other than that, I'm good. Thank you. Busy month. Lots of conferences, presentations, etc. But always a pleasure to be here with my people to address all these important topics.
Yeah, absolutely. It has been quite a way. There was a time where we only did these once a month, and we said let's go bi-weekly. Sometimes I think we need to go every week the way things are going now. But be careful what we ask for, because I may come one day and say, but that's another conversation. So let's get at it, because we don't got a lot of time and there is so much to chat about. So obviously, in a lot of people's minds, the big story is Ukraine and Russia. And I know, let's talk about it first, but then we also want to put Africa into the mix. Because if you've been on social media, there's been some very interesting videos about how Africans in Ukraine are being treated. But let's talk about the Ukraine-Russia conflict, and we'll morph right into the African lens on it. So who would like to chat first?
Well, I can start real quick. There's a bit of confusion as to why Putin now suddenly decides, I'm going to rain bombs on Ukraine. I mean, there's the stated objective, and that's to free supposedly oppressed peoples of Donbass, and I forget the other breakaway or secessionist region. But we in Africa, we've seen this before. We've seen this, and it just happened recently. I believe was it in Mali? Yeah, I think it was in Mali it happened. Basically, it's about regime change. He wants to put his puppet there so that he can be pulling some strings and continuing to have access to all of those resources.
Yes.
It's all about some cash, people.
Money. All about the money.
Exactly.
Follow the
It's
money.
not even, everybody's talking about, oh, his ego, and he's this short little guy with a complex and a this and a that and blah blah, and he doesn't have Trump to flatter dans le bon sens du poil, like to flatter him anymore. And there's Biden telling him, look, the party's over, etc. He wants to make himself relevant. He also may want to be distracting the Russian people from the misery he has been pounding them with, and the oppression. Because right next to Russia, the Russian people are seeing Ukrainians going about their business, living their lives and doing their thing and democratically electing, a president. Meanwhile, here's what's his face, president for life, like some of our African presidents, etc. So, you have to wonder why at all. And I just found the African Union position, right, on Russia. The African Union, through the chair on February 24th, it's the Senegalese president, Macky Sall. They've called on Russia to respect international law and Ukraine's sovereignty, and to get a ceasefire and open political negotiations to preserve the world from the consequences of planetary conflict. My country, Kenya, through our very eloquent Ambassador Kimani, Gabon and Ghana spoke out against the conflict at the emergency meeting that you may have seen on February 21st. But interestingly, many African countries have sort of, remained relatively quiet. And I'm going to let Cesar talk about the dynamic between the former USSR and the African continent, which would explain that.
Thank you, Sister Sarah. First and foremost, we have to recognize every armed conflict is a failure of political negotiations.
Yep.
And ultimately, beyond talking about ego, this is really about the notions of geopolitics in terms of power and space. But very truthfully, there is a link to the past. My brothers and sisters, do not fall for the Western narrative of, I'm not saying Ukrainian victimization. I want to be careful. All the innocent people are victims first and foremost. It doesn't matter on which side. But I find very disturbing and unfortunate to have people of the African Union give their voice or take a side in a conflict that truly does not concern them, considering the Western propaganda that once again comes into effect. Absolutely, yes, Russia is the oppressor in this case. But if we are honest, the conflict is about Ukraine joining NATO, while Ukraine is at the border of Russia. And how many people actually know that since the collapse of the former Soviet Union, there was a promise made to then General Secretary of the USSR, Mikhail Gorbachev, that NATO would not be expanding further east, past Germany. This is notably confirmed by the former French Foreign Affairs Minister, Roland Dumas, but even by the former Secretary/Ambassador, Raymond Burns of the United States back in 2008, that NATO was not to expand further east. This is the same thing that happened in 2022, 60 years ago, 1961, 1962, the Cuban Missile Crisis, We always hear the narrative in terms of USSR putting missiles in Cuba and therefore becoming a threat that could have led to World War III. We never hear the part about what happened before that. What happened before that? America putting missiles in Turkey, the historical enemy of Russia. America had missiles in Turkey that were directly threatening the survival of USSR. I'm a Pan-Africanist. I genuinely don't care about taking a side here. This is not my concern. But I know one thing. When these two are fighting, when they're destroying each other and notably destroying innocents, Africa and Black people are always at the bottom of the concerns. Because ultimately, one thing that we have to remember in the nature of these conflicts, it is always those who scream democracy, freedom, human rights, and justice. They tend to be the top arms salespeople in the world. And at the same time, we're talking about Ukraine, who went to invade Iraq under false weapons of mass destruction after starving and killing 1 million Iraqis, who notably contributed to the disintegration of Syria. Do we need to talk about Libya in 2011 with USA, France, and Great Britain?
Canada.
And Canada, yes. Mm-hmm. And the consequences all over North and Western Africa. Do we need to talk about Ivory Coast, Côte d'Ivoire, when France went to bring down Laurent Gbagbo and impose its puppet president, Alassane Dramane Ouattara? So my issue here in terms of the connection with Africa is we are being served the same usual narrative, and we can see the link to the past. This conflict is truly it's because Ukraine wants to join NATO. Don't get me wrong. Ukraine is an independent state that has the right to make its own choices. But when we talk about geopolitics, we talk about spheres of influence. Eastern Europe is a sphere of influence of Russia, in the same sense that 200 years ago, if my historical memory is correct, 1823, an American president, Monroe, declared through the Monroe Doctrine that the Americas from north to south, including the Caribbean, so from Canada to Brazil in the Caribbean, are the sphere of influence of United States. It's called the Monroe Doctrine. Look it up. This is why there is no French, British, Russian, Chinese, whatever you want to call it, base. Mm-hmm. But look at the number of American bases all around Russia. Look at all those bases all around Iran. I mean, this is not some anti-Western. We live here in the West, we're in Canada. I always say it, even in training and education, racism is global on the four corners of the world, but it's in the Western world that Black people have the more rights, as odd as it may seem. So this is not some anti-West narrative that I'm giving here. This is just giving the facts for our people to not fall into the trappings of picking sides, because our African countries, first and foremost, they're not really independent. Whether it be through France and France Afrique or through the Commonwealth and Britain, and notably American bases and notably the American force in Africa, AFRICOM, I think it's called, they're not really independent. So please, and we see this when we talk notably about the fate of Black students, notably Nigerian students stuck in Ukraine. Allow me to take a break as I welcome my brother into the chat, and then I can continue right after.
Yes, we've got him. Louis March.
Louis March.
The Zero Gun Violence movement coming in from an event. Thank you, Louis, for making the time. How we doing? How are you, your family, and the community massive? Can't hear you, Louis. Battle. There we go.
Yep, I'm still standing, still fighting. It's one battle after another. It's a global war. It's a national war. It's a city war. It's a community war. And we have to pick and choose which battlefields we show up at, because it's all over the place. But I'm glad to be here. I made it. And I just did good work out in the West End, and I'm here now with you.
Fabulous. We're going to put you right into it. What are your thoughts about Ukraine, Russia, and also the African lens that we're going to talk about? Cesar talked a little bit about already, but what are your thoughts?
No, Cesar is bang on. Like, all I was, shaking my head. I couldn't have said it any better. Look, we have to learn our history. We cannot be afraid to have our own narratives, but we cannot just jump in and adopt the narratives that other spheres of interest the Monroe Doctrine. You remember what happened in Cuba when the Russians put missiles in Cuba for defensive reasons, and the Americans hit the sky because it went contrary to the Monroe Doctrine, right? The history of the Ukraine, the ethnic groups within the Ukraine, not all of them are of the same blood. Some of are parts of Russia that was carved out before, right? And they are now saying that they want their independence. But again, the bottom line here is America wants to have more influence on the borders of Russia through what they call NATO, right? I heard that our premier, is willing to open the door for refugees from the Ukraine on the drop of a pen. He wants to open the door, right? The response by other countries around the world. Where was this when the African countries were warring and refugees were trying to escape? Where were they? This gives us an opportunity to really see what American dominance, Western dominance, who are the victims and who are the victors will be.
All right. Go ahead, Sarah.
Yeah, and Lou is right about, you know, the hypocrisy and the double standard, because here in Quebec, you know, right away our premier Legault was like, yes, you know, we're going to throw open the doors, and if they've got computer scientists and this and that and technicians, we have a labor shortage anyway. Let's go. Let's get these people and bring them in, and we're ready to receive them, etc. Excuse me, Premier Legault, what about the people that came across the border in Lacolle who helped out during the pandemic in our long-term care homes? Hello? Oh, wait. Oh, there's a backlog? Really? Why is there a backlog? Oh, you don't have enough staff to... Oh, really? And so you're going to have enough staff to process tens of thousands of Ukrainians in several weeks? Really? So, you know, you see that whole thing. And by the way, there are other wars that are raging on the continent as we sit here. People from Ethiopia who are trying to escape that war that's going on over there, which is not over. Just because the cameras have left and it's not, you know, top of mind, doesn't mean it went away. What about those people? What about people who are waiting to be reunited? Afghan refugees whose families are in second and third countries, Pakistan, India, and other places, trying to get here. So as Canadians, as Black Canadians, at some point we need to speak up and say, not in my name, not in my name. No hate against Ukrainians, but, you know, as voters, we notice that you will very quickly get some white people in on the fast track, and our people and other people of color will be left by the wayside. Just saying.
That's very well said. And I mean, this is a constant recurring of, you know, if you have to really call it what it is, white lives matter. You know, white victimization matters more. White tears, you know, there's this entire propaganda. And please, I'm going to say something that may shock some people. I actually don't blame Westerners for doing it. These are their people. They look like them. It is for us as Black people, as Caribbean, Africans, Black Americans, Afro-Brazilians, Black Indians, Black Australians, Indigenous, to value more the lives of our own people, to speak, to advocate more. Black History Month does not end on February 28th. It's 365, 366. And in doing such, this is why we must hold account our very own. We must hold accountable, and you know how I get when I talk about religions. We must hold accountable those Black pastors and priests who are calling for Black parishioners to pray for Ukraine, but they never said a word to pray for Haiti, for Congo, for Sudan, for Mali, for Kenya when there are terrorist attacks, for Cameroon where I'm born, for blacks in Brazil, blacks in the US, for Jamaica when something happens. They never talk about it. But hey, pray for Ukraine. Pray for Paris. Remember, pray for Paris. Pray for London. Pray for whatever happens in the United States.
Charlie Hebdo.
Je suis Charlie Hebdo. I am Charlie. And at the same time, we must hold our Black/African governments responsible, because as unfortunate and discriminatory that it is, and we can talk about racism all day, when we have African, and I don't know if they're all African, I'm just going to say Black, because that's really what it is. In the world, nobody cares whether you're African, Caribbean, whatever. You're Black, period. When we have Black students in Ukraine who are being victims of racism in terms of trying to escape a war-torn zone and being denied entrance on trains, and yet they're letting white people, aka Ukrainian nationals. On one side, I can absolutely understand you're going to prefer to save your own before saving the foreigners. But the truth is this, it's not really about the foreigners. It's because they're Black, because French foreigners have been let go. Foreigners of other countries have been able to escape. There is a visible discrimination against Black students. And again, it doesn't mean that all Ukrainians are racist, just as it doesn't mean all Russians are racist. But we cannot try to pretend that we talk about systemic racism on a global scale and try to pretend that there's no racism in Ukraine, in Russia, all over Eastern Europe, all over the Western world. And we surprise ourselves that we have testimonies of so many Black people. But worse than that, we have non-implication, non-direct involvement from the same African governments that 5 years ago, 2017, when Blacks were sold as slaves in Libya, what were those African governments? So African governments are failing Black people. They're failing their own people all over the world, in the same sense as Western governments are still propagating propaganda of lies and nature to continue the dominance in the world. That's basically what is going on in terms of linking Ukraine and Russia with Africa.
Yeah, and you're showing those really shocking images where, you've got most of the mature students, because Africans, when we go over there, we're studying medicine, engineering, STEM, etc. And a lot of these people, as you can see in those images, they have children. Like they've been raising families in Ukraine and contributing to the economies and the local communities where they live. Some of them have married Ukrainians, etc., etc. But you're Black, you get, the gun in your face. No, you're not getting on. Excuse me, that woman that went right in front of me, that white woman, that's my wife, and all these are our kids, right? And yes, the failure of African governments. In fairness, I have to wonder, because the Canadian government really is not much better when it comes to evacuating their own people from, conflict zones. Okay. I was hearing all kinds of horror stories about people trying to get out of Ethiopia. This was last year, right? And being told, no, you have to go. Those people and the COVID people at the beginning of the Omicron wave, you have to go to a second and then a third country. And then if you're lucky, you'll get a flight where consular services will help you get on that flight to come back to Canada. So it's not just African countries, but African countries are known to be just chronically incompetent. Chronically. And I'm seeing that as a daughter of a former career diplomat for over 3 decades, that as soon as something like this happens, their response is, oh, well, if you can get to our embassy in Brussels, or the one in this case for Kenyans, it's Berlin. Berlin is the closest one. Then we'll see how we can help you. What? Do you guys not have some sort of plan? That's another thing. There's never sort of a workable operational plan, as in we will charter buses, we'll have them waiting on the other side, on the Polish side of the border, and show your Nigerian passport and boom, you're on. No. So what's happening with the Nigerian? I was, before I came on, I was watching a telecast on YouTube between a Nigerian journalist and Nigerians who are actually in Kiev, in Lviv, and in other parts of Ukraine. And one guy who was on the Polish side, who said him and his buddies, they have cars, they've chartered minibuses, and what they're doing is driving to the border. And they're sending out tweets and saying, listen, if you're Nigerian, blah, 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 come to this spot.
Wow.
A bunch of us are going to drive you into Poland and help you out. People are having to rely on themselves, basically. It's a shame. It's a shame.
Absolute shame. We can always point the finger at racism. We can talk about the Westerners, and we can talk about the racist Ukrainians, the racist Russians, the racist aliens. But there is a shame in the capacity of our governments in terms of looking after our own people, and that is absolutely disgraceful. We saw this very well with slavery in Libya in 2017. What were the African governments? We're seeing it again. It comes to a point where it is not a surprise. It's not a surprise when you're Black to see racism. It just becomes further and further shocking to see how little our governments do. But let us dare to be honest, our African governments are also there, led by a bunch of puppets.
They're about themselves.
They care only about themselves.
No. All right. Any last words, Louis, before we move on to the next conversation topic?
Oh, you're on mute. Louis, we can't hear you.
Yeah, this hypocrisy, this double standard, this racism has played out for decades and centuries. When are we going to punch back? As a people, we're sick and tired of ducking in the ring. We got boxing gloves. We got to start punching back, and that's what we can control. I heard that the Nigerian government did make a call to ask what was going on with the Nigerian students, and the government has officially said, no, we're going to make this right. But whenever we put our situation or circumstance in a dependency relationship on others, it's a pathway for failure, and we've been playing this out too long. If this doesn't wake us up and force us to rethink our relationships in a meaningful way, then I'm not sure what else would. When America went into Iraq, when they went into Afghanistan, under the pretext of whatever, right? They bombed Iraq into the Stone Ages. They killed thousands, millions of people. Where was the outcry? Where was the outcry? Under the pretext, what did they say? The coalition of the willing. I call it the coalition of the bullied, right? Because if you weren't on America's side, you were against us, right? These type of things, like, it plays out, but we have to start thinking beyond what they feed us. We have to start eating our own food. Next subject, please.
let me just add what Brother Louis said.
Go ahead, Louis. Cesar.
I'm just very quickly, 10 seconds, what Brother Louis said. Who sanctions the West when he goes on such campaigns, killing thousands upon thousands? So far, we're hearing of 200 civilians, maybe 200, less than 1,000 dead right now by Russia. But we know the numbers in terms of people killed in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in Syria, notably due to the West, Ivory Coast. We have those numbers. Far more. Who sanctions the West? And in terms of our African students going to study abroad, and then there's a situation such as now in Ukraine, why don't we develop our own? Instead of building churches and mosques, where are those faculties of medicine in Africa? Where are those big schools, those think tanks? Where are we creating the winners of the Fields Medal and the Science Awards and the Nobel Prizes that they can study in Africa? Wakanda does not have to be a fiction. If we have it right there in Africa, our people won't have to be victim of discrimination and racism overseas. And instead, we can have Ukrainians coming to study in Africa instead of so-called peacekeeping missions. We can have Chinese come to study in Africa instead of, coming to get rich in Africa to go back to the country to enrich them.
I think we're done for this for now, but I think it ain't going away because obviously, who knows what will happen in the conflict? I've heard through news reports that the Russians and the Ukrainians are going to have a delegation meeting. I think in the next 24 hours. Who knows? And I'll just put in there. Something tells me Putin he would not hesitate to do the nuclear thing, but that's a whole other conversation. So let's move on next. 2 weeks ago, the city of Ottawa and Gatineau was on a lockdown. And we talked about it a few weeks ago. It's now dissipated. What are our thoughts now and going forward about the Freedom Train convoy? Who would like to start? Actually, Louis, I want you to start first because Sarah and Cesar had a chance to chat about it 2 weeks ago. What were your thoughts about the Freedom Train convoy, past, present, and what is the future?
So what they told me in school many moons ago is that people and things are seldom the way they appear. What you see in front of you, don't be afraid to look behind it, because there's a bigger story there. Even when we talk about gun violence, we're not talking about gun violence. What's going on behind? That's what we need to look at. When it comes to this freedom convoy, America better be on the lookout, because I hear there's one on its way to Washington right now. Happened in Ottawa. Look who was running it. Look at their professed mandates and manifestos. This had nothing to do with freedom. This has more to do with overthrowing a government from a white supremacist lens. And they made no bones about it. And they had a free pathway to exercise this violence against the government, against the people, against the province, and so on. And needless to say, if it was black people or indigenous people doing this, 24 hours would have been a long time before they called in the army, right?
24 minutes.
Okay, you see what I mean? So again, we have to look at these things from a black people's lens and stop looking at that from their perspective, right? These people got away with murder because of the color of their skin. Bottom line, the level of violence that they inflicted under the guise of freedom. Freedom for what? Freedom for white supremacists to have a blank check to do whatever they want. And everybody, there's a charge. It's called it's a criminal charge called willful blindness. Willful blindness, when you are responsible and you turn a blind eye and pretend as though you didn't know what was going on. And that's what we're seeing. Everybody coming in late to the party when the writing was on the wall. So it's going to be interesting to see how this unfolds. But again, what other wake-up call do we need before we're going to stand up and punch back on behalf of our people and not leave it in the hands of criminals who have a history of violence being not their last name but their first name against people that do not look like them?
Go ahead, Sarah.
I'm very curious because the downtown core, I mean, it's a mix of people who live there, but there's a lot of mostly white condo homeowners, etc., and old stately homes, and of course Parliament, etc. And I'm wondering if it was, mostly black, if it was like Bed-Stuy, or if it was, Harlem from the 80s or something like that, if the reaction, like the authorities, wouldn't have ended up acting as forcefully. I'm just wondering about that. That's one thing. The other thing too is there are many casualties in this thing, including now former Chief Slowly. And in the past week, we've been seeing these leaks to the effect that there was actually a mutiny already underway at Ottawa Police leading up to this thing, and that there are some officers who are known to have, collaborated with or willfully, done that willfully blind thing you were talking about, where they looked the other way while people were ferrying jerry cans of fuel to the trucks and food, and putting up the bouncy castle and setting up the hot tub and all of that. There were police officers the entire time. There weren't many, but they were there. And this thing of saying, oh, but we were outnumbered, so we couldn't go up to people and tell them not to do that and not to do this. Now, I'm sorry, I don't buy that, because as soon as you see a few Black people standing around at the Rideau Center minding their business, you are all up in their face, sometimes 4 or 5 of you, okay? And some Black people aren't even doing anything. They're not occupying anything. They have shopping bags in their hands, and there you go. So don't even go there. I want to see heads roll, and roll hard, really hard, okay? From those people in the Canadian Forces, some veterans who were at that monument, who were quote unquote guarding it. Please, they need to do a cleanup job, and it needs to be more than just the sexual harassment and sexual assault. It needs to be the white supremacists, because the number one terror threat in Canada now, in my opinion, it's not those brown-skinned people who are minding their own business that you stop up and down the street. It's them white people that are putting out videos talking about, we want Canada back, make Canada great again, and that sort of thing. So our intelligence community, law enforcement, and the judicial system, they need to get caught up. And as Louis says, this was that wake-up call. But I have to say, as someone who works in Ottawa and used to live in Ottawa, the trauma, I can't even start unpacking the trauma. And I'm sure I'm not the only one.
Cesar?
Dr. Vibe, I'm just going to piggyback on what Louis and Sarah were just saying. Canada is one of the worst countries for white supremacy. And when we have such a thing as a so-called Freedom Convoy, I very purposely call it the Freedom, D-U-M-B,
yes,
Convoy, started by white supremacists. This is not a matter of my opinion. This is not Sarah's opinion. This is not Louis' opinion. These people, the organizers, such as the Tamara Lynch, I remix her name, saying Lynch instead of Leach, who joined a separatist, one of those exit movements from Brexit to Wexit to California exit, etc., are known for being nest of white supremacists in the logic of make America great again, make Canada great again. All these make great again are AKA anti-immigration, anti-multiculturalism, anti-Black. This is not me saying it. This is people like Pat King who believe in attempt to eradicate the Anglo-Saxon race, aka the Great Replacement. We have Black people who are following this type of leaders because of the lack of education on these topics, the ignorance. Ignorance kills a lot in the Black community. People don't like to talk about it. This is not about because I say and I think so, therefore I'm right. This is based on facts. These leaders of the Freedom Convoy don't hide their affiliations. They're proud of it. The Freedom Convoy was a convoy of angry, uneducated white males who basically went over there over the mandate to get vaccinated to cross the border when their own national syndicate clearly indicated that 90% of the truckers in Canada are vaccinated. So this was a minority of truckers. We shouldn't even call them the truckers. They don't represent the truckers. And even if Trudeau had changed his mind, the US also required vaccination. So it was dumb, D-U-M-B, from the start. And to make it worse, the mandates, such as the provincial mandates, were bound to end like all the mandates have come before. This was absolutely a failure of leadership from the police to the city to other levels of government, yes. But as Sarah said so well, as much as we can say that Peter Slowly did fail in terms of being a police chief, he was undermined from the start, and he was very much revealed in terms of even the police board. And at the same time, I find absolutely outrageous that we live in this country of Canada where we had Black Lives Matter protests just 2 years ago. Many people who were there saying, stop racism, Black Lives Matter, are there supporting this white supremacist freedom, D-U-M-B convoy. Yet at the Black Lives Matter protest, we didn't see racist flags. We didn't see behaviors of pissing, defecating, and occupying. We know way too well what would have happened to all these Black people, Indigenous, and white allies in the Black Lives Matter protest. And yet this is what happened. So there is a trauma that is happening in terms of the downtown inhabitants of Ottawa towards this convoy. But at the same time, we have to speak truthfully to what this has really done. These minority of truckers and white privileged males and their leaders, they may have failed in the revendications, but I'm very happy it has happened. Why? They have brought to the surface that ugly Canadian postcard that Canada doesn't like to show to the world. It's so comfortable to always say Charlottesville, that's in the US. It's so comfortable to always say those "you will not replace us white supremacists with the torches," that's in the US. No, it's right here in Canada. And they're all over in our institutions. How do you have the chief of police of Winnipeg saying the Freedom Convoy in a city were full of very fine people? How do we have someone like some of our MPs talking of them as fine people using the language of Trump? How do we have a hypocrite, and yes, I'm saying a hypocrite, as the wannabe leader of the Conservative Party, Pierre Poilievre, going to show support to the convoy, the Freedom Convoy in 2022, and yet just 3 years ago when he was wet-sweating with Indigenous people, he was talking about how they shouldn't block the roads, they should make space. Is it because those are Indigenous and these ones are white? How do we have people like, what's her name, the interim PC leader,
Candice Bergen,
talking about how, we should use this tragedy, these circumstances against the liberals. And once she comes into power, it's like, okay, we heard you, time to go home now. The hypocrisy, this is not an Americanization of Canadian politics. This is Trumpization, Trump-style politics in Canada with all the baggage that it comes with. But it's not because of Trump. It's because all of these elements are right here in Canada. I always said it. Canada is the little brother of America. Everything good in America, you have it here, maybe lesser. Everything bad in America, you have it here, maybe lesser. And now, as Sister Sarah said, white supremacy is the number one domestic threat to Canada, just as to America. And it's only going to continue and be worse as the birth rates of whites keep decreasing. There's more immigration and multiculturalism for employment and taxation. There's more interracial relationships. We know this type of people who organize the Freedom Convoy. They don't like it. They're looking at it as the great replacement. So my Black people who have supported this, and notably those who said they were Indigenous, they're no. There are some Indigenous people who were part of it, but Indigenous nations did not support this. I do not know. I might be wrong. I do not know of any major Black organization that supported this, even if there were a few Black people who went to show support. And now these people are having the consequences through fines and notably through imprisonment. It's very dumb, D-U-M-B, because a lot of them have been manipulated. A lot of them, they fall victim to anything and everything sensationalist, such as in the Fox News. I mean, put yourself in my place. I had a debate with an Indigenous woman when the extent of the fallacies and conspiracy she was saying led me to ask her where she gets her news from, and she said Fox News. How are you indigenous and you telling me that you support the Freedom Convoy because you get your news from Fox News? Fox News is a channel that basically would love to have all indigenous people get away from America so that it becomes truly a white nation. It's incredible.
Well, I think one of the other things, and I don't know if we'll stay too long on this because we do have some other things to chat about that's interesting, is how much money came from the United States to fund the Freedom Convoy. So, it's going to be very interesting to see, definitely going forward. We've always known America has had an influence on Canada. It's now gone to a whole other level of the American influence. And as Cesar said, there's good influence, but now we're seeing more and more bad influence. Any final comments before we move on to the next conversation piece on Freedom Truckers? Freedom Convoy, sorry.
One thing this whole traumatic saga did for me was to realize the extent of the reach of government, because once the Emergencies Act went in, actually before it went in, frozen accounts, boom, 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 all over the place. And I mean, it was kind of scary to see that, even though I was glad they were doing that, because that was a way to stop people from prolonging their stay. A lot of people left when they realized, oh my God, the frozen accounts, that thing is real, even though Mr. King and Tamara and them were saying otherwise. And it sort of made me question, so what is the responsibility of government in a situation like this? Why are you waiting 20-something days to put your mettre tes culottes, like to,
pull up your pants,
grow some balls and just say, listen, we're not having this. It's been a week. You need to go home. We're calling up police forces here, there, everywhere, and whatever, and they're coming here, and boom, there you go.
Sister Sarah, if I can try to give an element of answer very shortly, and I invite everyone to think about this, notably if you oppose the Freedom Convoy, but I genuinely think our Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, suffers from a PTSD response in relation to his father, P.E. Trudeau, crisis, invoking the 1970 War Measures Act, not wanting to come off as a dictator, but at the same time, I am one of those who agree with him that he shouldn't have gone to talk with them, because some of them are so anti-government, so anti-Trudeau. I mean, people like to say, oh, you weren't there, it wasn't a bunch of white supremacists, blah, blah. I was there Friday night. I took photos. I was there in the downtown of Ottawa. I was there. I knew this was going to be historic. I had to be there. Those flags from the United States, I saw them. I took photos. I was there Friday night. I was in the traffic. I was in front of the Laurier Castle, Chateau Laurier. And I saw them. I've never seen so many flags of Quebec in downtown Ottawa. But I think there's a lot of that. And the other thing that we must always remember is simply this. I genuinely, absolutely am convinced more of this will be happening. More of this will be happening because these white supremacists, I'm not just talking white supremacists, but even closet racist whites, they just needed to have some of the blacks and indigenous being present to say, I'm not racist. There was a black or indigenous person there, but more of this will be happening. And as such, we also have to mobilize ourselves. Not mobilize ourselves in terms of supporting the government per se, but mobilize ourselves because sooner or later, some of these people will take action, violent actions against the changes in society that they don't like.
I think it's also important. I think that point I just want to leave on this one is, what next? What are they going to do next?
Yes.
Because they've been emboldened by the fact that they got away with this.
Absolutely.
Right? There were guns that were found, ammunition, everything found out in the West. Those guns were not there just by chance. They were there by design to be part of this protest. Absolutely. So they've opened the gates of hell in terms of what we can do, what we can get away with based on the color of our skin. And they're going to use that. They're going to play that. And Canada and the government better be on alert, because this is the beginning of a new strategy in terms of protesting and overthrowing governments.
Well said, brother. Well said.
All right, just some really quick comments. Andrea from Ottawa saying, so right, Sarah, they threw the former chief solely under the bus. And she also says, definitely they were trying to undermine democracy. Absolutely. And shout out to Dr. Tachi. And don't got a lot of time left, but let's get to some other conversations. Judge Ketanji Brown, nominated
Black girl magic
to the United States Supreme Court.
Yeah.
Anyone have any comments on this potentially it's a historic moment, maybe an historic appointment?
Yeah, so real quick, for folks who don't know, President Biden had committed to appointing a Black woman because, that's who actually helped put him over the top and get him elected. He was looking at 3 Black women, actually: Ketanji Brown Jackson, Leandra Kruger, and J. Michelle Childs. And they have different profiles. Jackson is a U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit, and she had replaced Attorney General Merrick Garland. Remember Merrick Garland, who Obama wanted to appoint back in the day?
Well, he's Attorney General now.
Yeah, he's Attorney General now. Yeah. So, Ketanji Brown Jackson actually had clerked for Stephen Breyer, whose seat she is most likely going to be filling. Kruger is out in California. She's an associate justice, and she was acting principal deputy solicitor general under Obama. Okay. And then Childs, and this one, some Republicans from the South are going to be pissed off that she wasn't chosen, because Childs is on the U.S. District Court for the District of South Carolina. And she had previously been nominated by Biden for a seat on the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, where Ketanji Brown Jackson sits. This is a good thing. She was a safe choice, I would say. She was a safe choice. And apparently she's one of only 2 former public defenders who is being nominated to the court. So her lens that she's going to be looking at cases with is going to be somewhat different. I hope she puts the heat under Clarence Thomas's bum and really gives him a run for his money until he retires. And hopefully she's going to be a forceful voice for actual justice and for actual law. And it's funny how you get the right-wingers like Tuckums and the Fox News gang who are complaining about, oh, yeah, you chose her just for what she looks like and her complexion and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, hello, all the white judges who were nominated before Thurgood Marshall, the first Black judge, right? And they also are accusing her of being, like a puppet of the left, like the radical left. And this, it's like, excuse me, the radical right, Kavanaugh, and what's her name? Coney Barrett. So there's a lot of hypocrisy in the reaction of the Republican side. I think she's going to get through. And make a difference.
Before anyone else comments, just interesting about Sarah, you said you said something very troublesome there. Hypocrisy in American politics? They don't. Come on now. Hypocrisy in American politics? But you know what? From my lens, I'm just going to watch to see how the Republicans grill her. Because the post she has right now, there was support from both sides for her appointment. So it's going to be interesting what goes on forward. So I just wanted to put that in there. Other gentlemen, if you have any comments.
Very quickly, I will have... Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Brother Lee. Go ahead.
I think America needs to do a fact check on their democracy and their justice system. They just need to do a fact check, and they will be exposed. They got problems. They just need a fact check to confirm what they're saying they're doing is what they're actually doing, because everybody knows, including themselves, that there's miles of difference in between. They just need a fact check because their democracy and their justice systems are nothing compared to what I read in the books and what it should be.
And
Well,
the Constitution.
Well, just an interesting comment. Look at all the states trying to take out books out of their school system because
because of critical race theory. Anything that makes them feel uncomfortable, they don't want to do. Like, come on. And they're getting away with it too.
Of course.
But the horse has left the barn when it comes to that. And those, especially white people who think they're going to be rolling back progress on a grand scale, have another thing coming, because there's several generations who just don't buy this whole white supremacy thing and who want to move ahead and move forward. And you can ban all the books you want. Them kids are going to go on Amazon and buy them.
Or
their
TikTok,
parents will buy them.
TikTok, IG Live, all those sort of things. Cesar, we've held you back. Sorry about that.
No, that's great. I mean, your brother Lee was actually going my way because I was going to talk a little bit about critical race theory, aka equity, diversity, and inclusivity. Two angles. First of all, yes, the hypocrisy of the Republicans. Let us give a name: Ted Cruz. People like Ted Cruz slamming Joe Biden, and it has nothing to do with liking Joe Biden and the Democrats, obviously. But the hypocrisy in claiming this is discriminatory and racism and an insult to black women. This guy wants to try to put himself there as a champion of black women since when? This is a guy who basically flip-flops in order to stay in power. He becomes ass kisser to Donald Trump when it suits him in order for him to be reelected. At the same time, we have to be careful. And I'm saying we have to be careful. Let us not fall as black people into considerations. I mean, considerations that matter, sure, such as who is she married to, all these type of private life consideration. But why I'm saying to be careful, there is a black judge in the Supreme Court of the United States by the name of Clarence Thomas. We cannot talk. I mean, this is like, I'm about to repeat kind of the same language I was talking about Ukraine and Africa, but we can't just point the finger at white people, especially Republicans, talking about hypocrisy, when we have a black judge who benefited from affirmative action to become a judge of the Supreme Court, and yet is very conservative. He's very pro-white. And I don't care that his wife is white. I am not against interracial relationships and all that. But it's a little bit concerning. It's very concerning when you have arguably the most conservative judge to be Clarence Thomas in a complete betrayal of affirmative action. So let's be happy indeed that Judge Ketanji Brown most likely will be nominated. Yes. But let us hold her accountable. You don't get a pass simply because you have the same skin color as me, because God knows, and you know I don't believe in God. There's enough black people who support Trump, will support the Republicans despite their lies to the black community, but also the Democrats despite their lies to the black community. And there's enough black people who, if slavery or colonization started tomorrow, they will be saying it's a wish of God, Jesus, and Allah. So let's hold our sister accountable in the same way that we support for her to get the nomination.
But well, before we move on to our next conversation point, both Louis and Sarah giggled there. I saw the smile on their face.
What can I say?
You want to add anything? Because when Louis smiles like that, I know they're saying, yeah, Louis, you want to add anything?
No. Let's move on. I want to get to Black History Month.
Okay. One other comment on this. Interesting question from Andrea from Ottawa saying, what about Canada's Supreme Court?
Excellent.
Yeah, isn't there a judge who just retired? I believe, or is going to retire, or yeah. And I mean, Trudeau did put forward the name of, I believe he's Ismaili, if I'm not mistaken. Someone of South Asian extraction, the first person of color other than beige on Canada's Supreme Court, right? So the next logical step is a black somebody. or an indigenous somebody and then a black somebody. Right?
We'll see.
We will see.
We will see. Well, let's move on to our final conversation topic. And Louis wants to talk about, so we are broadcasting on February 27th, 2022. And there's one more day left of Black History Month. So wanted to get our panelists to chime in. What do they think about this Black History Month? And what's next?
I think when it comes to Black History Month, I just want to make this clear. And look, when they have to decide when we talk about our Black history, we got a problem. It's not for them to dictate to us. But the Jewish people do not go to the Germans and say, can you tell me what happened in the Second World War and Auschwitz and those camps? They don't do that. They write their own story about what took place. So I don't see why we as a people have figured that the right thing to do is go and ask those people that enslaved us, brutalized us, exploited, killed us for 400 years and ask them to tell us about our history. It does not make any sense. And if we haven't figured that out yet, then we got some more work to do. We got a problem. Christopher Columbus was a state-sponsored pirate. If you look at his resume, state-sponsored pirate. You think they're going to write that into their history books? Because if they write that into their history book, it's going to undo everything they've said about world history. They can't put it in there. It's about time that we take responsibility and ownership of telling our own history, regardless of which chapter. When we give that to the oppressor to tell us, we got a problem. And Marcus Garvey, 100 years ago, said that with our inferior education, we have become our worst enemy. That was 100 years ago, my friends. And guess what? We have these dependency models on the oppressed. We're going to them? It's sad. So I've got Black History Month events scheduled for next week. And as a matter of fact, 2 weeks. Just to let them know that I'm not drinking their Kool-Aid. We're going to start mixing our own Kool-Aid right now. And that's it in a nutshell for me on Black History Month. I'm not here to tell you what you know about our history. I'm here to tell you what you do not know when I show up.
Sarah?
Yeah, and in all fairness, Louis, there are a number of Black people who have been telling our stories. Dr. Vibe had two of them on his show last Sunday, Jennifer Holness and Sutherland, who premiered yesterday night at 9 p.m. on History Channel and Global TV, BLK, An Origin Story. And they are telling those stories that Louis is talking about, the ones that the mainstream narrative does not include for very obvious reasons, because it makes some white people look bad, right? So slavery, the slavery that went on in Canada for 200 years, the exploitation of the Maroons, the fact that some Black people were so mistreated, they just like found their way on a ship and hightailed it back to Africa, right? So we've got filmmakers like Jen and Suds. We've got Cheryl Fogo talking about the history of Blacks in Alberta. We've got people like Selwyn Jacob also telling our stories. And what we need to do is the people who are doing that work, which is thankless work because it takes funding to do it. And we all know that on the pecking order, Black people be at the back of the line when it comes to some government funding, right? Dr. Vibe, Jen and Suds did bring that up, you know, the struggle to get the funding to tell stories that funders deemed sort of peripheral and not necessarily worthy, etc. A lot of work has been done. The Ontario Black History Society has been doing a lot of research and good work there. We also have Black museums, Black created, Black led, and Black owned museums, mostly in the Maritimes and in Southern Ontario. We need to be going there. We need to put our money there, not the Royal Ontario Museum Go to our Black museums that tell our Black history. We have people who have been writing books for years and years. Do we buy their books? Black people telling Black stories. Canadian Black stories specifically, because that's really where there is a need. Americans have, out the wazoo. Caribbeans have, Africans as well. Canadian Black stories. So that work is being done. We need to ask for more, obviously. The way I see Black History Month is an opening. But as the government of Canada said this year as their theme, February and beyond. February and beyond. It's not just February. And in fact, I'm hoping for the day when Black History Ottawa will be out of business. And we are not going to need February because all of our stories are in the national narrative and in, the classrooms the way they should always have been.
One other thing I'd like to just contribute here is because they control the narrative, and Dr. Vibe and myself have spoken about who's controlling the content and the narrative. So yes, good things are happening. We need to support it better, but we must not be afraid to insert the pieces that destroy the fabric of their lives. For example, they keep talking about the slave trade. And I'm saying to myself, slave trade? We were not slaves and there was no trade. So why do you call it slave trade? They call it slave trade because that's a rationale and excuse for them not doing reparations, because they claim it was legal. And we bought into it. We refer to it as slave trade too. And I'm saying, no, let's call it for what it was. It was human trafficking, and it was an African genocide. So I don't want anybody to talk to me about slave trade, because again, we've bought into their narrative and as a consequence giving them an excuse not to do the right thing. It was human trafficking, African human trafficking. And when you say human trafficking, we know automatically who did what to who. But they've been able connivingly brand it in 2 words that we repeat over and over again without challenging it. So when I'm saying that we have to get into the driver's seat on this now and start telling our story. Slave trade is a figment of your imagination. It was human trafficking and African genocide, period. And now you're going to be held responsible. Because cloaking it in slave trade to me, and we're buying into it, means that we still haven't figured it out.
Go ahead, Cesar.
I'd just like, no, thank you very much. Great exchange between Brother Louis. Absolutely, human trafficking and genocide. And absolutely great point by Sister Sarah in terms of talking about us, Afro-Canadians. Do we tell our stories? Do we advocate? Do we buy the books that tell our stories? So, Luke, if you don't mind, I'd like, I shared a link of a book that we can, all of us, Black Canadians, and not just Black Canadians, everyone, through Indigo, you can go buy this book, Trailblazers, The Pioneers Who Shaped Canada, by Tiana Ridley Padmore. The illustrator is Meryl Ndema-Moussa. You recognize the last name. It's my first brother. And I have contributed as a translator to the writing of the French book. It's not yet on sale, but it will be anytime coming. As such, I invite you, thank you, Sister Sarah, I invite you, for your children, for your youth, and for yourself. The writer, Tiana Ridley Padmore, has done a great and amazing job of over 40 Canadian Black historical figures that we need to know. This is not just a matter of Rosa Parks in the USA, Viola Desmond in Canada, but from Olivier Lejeune and Marie-Joseph Angélique to Jean Augustine and Lincoln Alexander, and of course, Michael Jean. It is about us knowing our heroes, knowing our people. So many names we can add. Names across both borders, such as Harriet Tubman. It's important for the sense of identity, the sense of culture, very much connecting to our previous conversation about the freedom convoy and the rise, when I say rise, the visible rise of white supremacy. We need to have our children, our youth, but also our Black adults of any shade, any colorism. I don't care about how mixed you are or how dark-skinned Black you are. We need, as Afro-Canadians, to have a sense of identity and culture to stand up, to be unapologetically Black. And as Brother Louis said, we cannot do so if we only expect whites and non-Blacks to tell our story. School boards are understanding this more and more. I am working notably with some school boards, such as the French Catholic School Board of Eastern Ontario, very much interested. University of Ottawa, my conference, my last conference this week, great interest. We need to tell our stories. As the African proverb says, the story of the hunt will always be of the hunter until the lion, the animals, the oppressed Black people tell their own stories. Thank you.
All right. Any final thoughts before we shut this epic conversation down today? Anyone have any final? Go ahead, Sarah.
Yes, another reason you should watch content like BLK and Origin Story and Black Liberators of World War II and all of the National Film Board films that have been done about Canadian Black historical figures is the more eyeballs there are, the more views, ratings, etc., etc. Data matters. What is not, measured doesn't matter. So the more of us watch this content, etc., we are making the case for better funding. And I'd like to salute Andrea Pierce for really backing up that point about the funding gaps and the disparities. And we also must advocate. We must demand, like all those parents I've seen going to their schools and demanding that school boards, have more Black focused content, not just history, but in other subject matter as well. The people who go to the movie premieres and the film festivals in Toronto, you're so lucky, Louis. You have so many Black film festivals. I can't even remember them all, but we need to go to those. We need to, buy tickets, put our money where our mouth is. It's all well and good talking about we must this. But if you're not investing in it, white people see that. They're like, they just talk. They don't care. So why should we care, right? So yes, people, February and beyond, because as Cesar said very, very well, we's Black all the time, 365. Okay, so happy Black Excellence Month, and wishing Louis all the best in all of his events in March.
No, you know what? And it's not only in the school system; it's at home. We must walk, talk our history, standing tall and proud. Kwame Nkrumah in the 1950s said, if they can have Encyclopedia Britannica, there's no reason why we can't have Encyclopedia Africana. And he commissioned 3 people from the Caribbean, America, and Africa to start on that work. If they can have Encyclopedia Britannica, then we must have Encyclopedia Africana. And that's the crux of it. But we have to invest in it. And we have to make it happen.
Excellent. Well, they call it Black Canada Talking. It's on every week, 5 p.m. Eastern Time. Most of the time we're live. Every other week we do these roundtables, and you need to be here, especially live. You need to be at these conversations. Want to thank our people who watch today. Just want to highlight some people: Christopher Lawrence, Andrea from Ottawa, Dr. Tachi from Florida, Kevin Messam. I think you're in California now. And others. If I did mention your name, it's my head, not my heart. And before we let go, we're going to let each one of the panelists give their contact information. First off, best place to get a hold of Sarah is where?
Black on Black 891 at hotmail.com. And Black on Black airs every Saturday from 11 a.m. to noon on CHUO 89.1 FM.
Next up, Cesar.
You can reach me. I'm still there. Facebook, Cesar Remy, Rimy, and also rootsandculturecanada.com. Or just Google me, send an email. Thank you.
And Louis March, best place for people to contact you.
Yeah, the best place to contact me is through social media, Louis March, and also by email. It's zerogunviolence.movement@gmail.com. And we monitor that very frequently throughout the day. zerogunviolence.movement@gmail.com. Then you can use social media and also just Google Louis March. I'll be there.
Yeah, Louis Googlicious. Don't worry, folks. He's Googlicious. Just want to also say correction. Kevin Messam is back in New York City. So you're back in New York. And Sheraton Knight, thank you so much for joining the conversation. I am Dr. Vibe, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe show, the home of Epic Conversations. I'm the host of Epic Conversations 2020. Best Podcast News Award winner, 2018 Innovation Award given out by the Canadian Ethnic Media Association. And I host the only online conversation in the world for fathers and dads. It's co-sponsored by Dove Men Care and Dad Central. As always, this is what I close with. Live your life as a dream. If you can dream it, you can make it. Sometimes you have to get small to get stronger. Block assumptions. Then aim bigger, aim better, aim higher, aim wider. Love, faith, and respect. And last two things I always say these days, remember to give yourselves grace. Oh, I'll slip in there too, thanks to BIA Media for the production. And finally, remember, do not manage your time. Manage your energy. See you next week, 5 p.m. And also throughout the week, 9 a.m., Mondays and Fridays, I co-host the Morning Vibe with Ryan Knight. And on Saturday evenings at 9 p.m., I host and produce State of Things with Aisha and Jill. Aisha K. Staggers and Jill Jones give their takes on what's going on, mainly in America, but around the world. And also, subscribe to the Dr. Vibe show on YouTube and or Facebook. You'll get notifications when we have these epic conversations. God bless. Peace to all. Keep the faith and walk good.